What's up, guys? I'm BTC. Welcome back to the Respawn, where I answer your questions. Today we're talking about changes to Genji, Brigita, Mercy, and new types of tanks. Today's video is sponsored by Audible. You can get a free audiobook to keep forever and support the channel by using the link down below. If you haven't tried audiobooks yet, what are you waiting for? They're awesome. I listen to them every single day, and this is a great chance for you because even if you decide to cancel, you get to keep the book that you picked forever. There's also a great no-hassle return policy, and you can exchange any book at any time for any reason. There's a massive library of books to choose from, so go and grab your free audiobook and start listening today. Let's get started. First question, is it more effective to zap and melee with Winston or just zap? This was answered a while ago, but because of the armor changes, it is a relevant question again. The answer is pretty much the same. If you have multiple targets, you always want to use your primary attack, and if you have a single target, you want to use your quick melee kind of weaved in between those primary attacks. Now, even with the changes to armor, this is still going to be really good, but it's very important that you actually hit with that quick melee, because if you miss or if you're out of range or whatever, then it's going to have a significant damage drop-off. But the reason is not because it necessarily increases your damage short-term, it just takes longer for you to reload. So let me show you real fast. This is how long the normal attack has from full down to empty. So it goes pretty fast, right? But then when you're weaving in those quick melees, you can see that there are these pauses when you're not using ammo, but your damage per second is remaining the same, provided that you're hitting those quick melees. So that's generally what's happening. You do have to be careful that you don't accidentally quick melee and interrupt that reload, because then it'll kind of make it take even longer. But that's still the general rule. Whether they have armor or not, it's still worth it to do the quick melee weave. Next question, is double shields meta for all ranks? Yes and no. Here's the thing about meta. It's more than just picking the characters. There's also specific playstyles and strategies that need to be implemented. Now, some metas are a little bit more open and more lax with this, and you can kind of do whatever you want, but others require you to be more specific in the strategy that's being used for those particular set of characters. Now, a good example of this is with Reaper. If you look at the Master GM and the Overwatch League players who were using Reaper, they stay with their team. They don't go off on these solo flanking missions that you will very often see in the lower bracket. So even though you're using the meta comp, where you have Sigma, Orisa, Reaper, Mei, that sort of stuff, if the Reaper is going off and doing his own thing, then that is not what the meta actually is. So there's more to just picking the characters. Having said that, the reason why certain characters are in the meta is because at any particular time, they happen to be the best in the game right at that time. So the reason why Orisa and Sigma are used is because right now they're the best tank combination in the game. You can use other stuff and it might work, but still Orisa and Sigma are the most optimal at this point in time. Now that might change a month, 2 months down the road, but right now they're the best. So even in bronze, even in gold or whatever, if you're using something other than Orisa and Sigma, you're putting your team at a minor disadvantage because you're not using the best characters right now. Now, again, it doesn't mean you have to, it just means that you're kind of already starting a little bit below what you should be. Next question. Oh, this should be fun. What do you think is the worst part about Overwatch? Okay, all jokes aside, there are some pretty big issues that Blizzard is either just ignoring or are not handling properly. The first one is hero balance. It is terrible. It has always been terrible. At no point in the entire life of this game has the character balance been anything even remotely close to being good. And I said it before, I'll say it again. At any point in time during Overwatch's history, you have a couple of characters that are pretty much considered must-pick. You have a few others that go along with it. You have a whole bunch of them that are just not really viable, and then you have a couple that are just so garbage, almost nobody uses them, right? And this doesn't change. The characters might change. It might go from dive to goats to double barrier, whatever. You might shift those around, but there's never any point where you have a whole bunch of characters that are actually useful. It's always like this 7 or 8 characters, and they just outshine everything by a mile. And it's just not good hero balance. You have characters like Reaper who might be good in the meta and who might be strong at the lower bracket, but he has one of the worst, objectively worst abilities in the entire game. And I've talked about that before, I don't want to go into it again. But in the Overwatch League, Shadow Step is used like once every 3 minutes. It's just ridiculous, right? So there's a whole bunch of problems with hero balance. It's just absolutely terrible. The second thing is throwers. Now, from what I've seen, it's pretty much 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 games will have a thrower on one of the teams. That is unbelievably bad, and Blizzard just doesn't do anything about it. You know, you might report someone, maybe something happens, maybe it doesn't, or maybe they get like a 30-minute suspension or a 1 day or something, and then they just come back and they keep doing it again. And Blizzard is just not doing enough about it. It's ridiculous, it's frustrating, and it is just absolutely destroying competitive. Smurfs are also another big issue, but that's harder to address. Blizzard really does need to have some sort of player review system in place that can deal with the absolutely massive amount of throwers that are in the competitive ladder. And for a third thing, we'll make this an honorable mention. The story is just absolute garbage. It started out okay, but now it's full of internal inconsistencies, retcons, and they're just putting in dumb stuff instead of actually making the story interesting. So, I mean, ultimately it doesn't really matter because the story doesn't affect the gameplay, but it's still something that a lot of people have an interest in, and it's just kind of unfortunate that the writing and the story in this game is such absolute garbage. Moving on to the next question, do you think Sombra should be reworked into a support? Absolutely no. In fact, they should probably just rename the support category to healers, because you need to heal in there anyways, so just call them healers. Symmetra as a utility support did not work, and that's why they moved her out into DPS. But fun fact, Jeff Kaplan actually told a story where prior to the release of Sombra, they were trying to decide whether or not they were going to put her into DPS or into support because she did have so much utility with the hack and the health packs and all that sort of stuff. They were trying to treat her more as a support, but ultimately they decided to keep her in DPS, and that's where she should stay. No, don't put her into support ever. Next question, is Brigita going to have some form of a buff? I really don't know. Like, there's been a couple of patches since the character was kind of reworked, and they haven't really done a whole lot with the character. I mean, they gave her the little HUD update, which is pretty cool, where it shows you the health packs, the repair packs that you can throw out. So that's a nice little thing, but that didn't actually change the strength of the character. Now, they tried to use Brigita during the Overwatch League Grand Final, so at least one team did. They tried to use Brigita at the very beginning, and they got absolutely destroyed. The character is completely ineffective. Now, whether or not that's just because of the double barrier, that could be it, but I still think even without double barrier as the meta, Brigita is going to struggle, and that she needs some changes. Are they going to actually do it? I don't know. Right now, it seems like they're just trying to kind of leave her as is. Next question. Would Genji's Deflect be better if it was on a resource meter? I don't think so. I mean, for the Genji player, yeah, it would probably be better, but I don't think it would be better for the game. And I've talked about this for other characters. I don't like the idea of putting so much stuff on resource meters. I think it's easier for game balance, and it's easier for just the game in general, better for the game, to have abilities that you press it, it uses it, and then it goes on cooldown for a certain amount of time. That way there's kind of an impact to it. Like, you have to decide when you're going to use it. If you can use it pretty much any time you want, then it's far less punishing, and it's to kind of misuse it, and it's far less skillful to decide when you need to use it, right? Because if you just click it, for right now, for example, if you just click D.Va's Defense Matrix and you use it for like half a second or something, then it's not really a big deal because it's going to come back almost right away. But with Sigma's Kinetic Grasp, for example, you press that button and it's gone for a while now. So there's a lot more skill and decision making involved in having the ability on a full cooldown. So I don't like the idea of putting stuff like that on the resource meter. Next question, what about an ability to pull back booped allies? So they get knocked off an edge, you grab them, you pull them back. Essentially a friendly Roadhog hook. I don't think this is a good idea for the game. I know a lot of people suggest this for healers and even for some tanks, but I just don't think it would work in the game because it's way, way too easy for people to misuse it. Whether it's on purpose or even accidental. Like, yes, you have the obvious situations where they can stand near an edge, you can grab a teammate and you just dump them off the edge, right? That's the obvious stuff. But even accidentally, right? Like, if they're trying to use an ability or they're aiming at a Pharah or something and you just grab them and pull them out of the way, then you kind of mess it all up for them. So it seems like it would be more harmful than helpful. I just don't think a friendly Roadhog hook ability is really a good idea. So probably not. Next up, do you think a tank that plays like a sniper would work? I don't think so, because the whole point of a tank is to be in front of the team to absorb damage and to protect your team. And if you're way in the back, how are you going to protect them? I mean, maybe you could throw barriers out on somebody, right? Like, kind of like what Zarya does. You could do that, but you would have to have enough barriers to kind of constantly do it. Like, it couldn't be like Zarya level kind of bubble stuff, because it just wouldn't offer enough protection. So I just don't really think you can have something be a tank if they're way in the back. They have to be able to take damage, unless they have some sort of weird kit where they have low damage, but they can provide a massive amount of barriers and bubbles and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, then we kind of run into another situation where that might not be good for the game either. So I don't really think it would work. I mean, you could, but it probably wouldn't be good for the game. Next up, after this next patch, what do you think is the state of Mercy? She's probably still gonna be pretty bad compared to like Ana, Baptiste, and Moira. Not necessarily that she's just complete garbage, it's just that she's largely outshined by those other healers. Now, if the game ends up shifting more towards dive, then she might get used more often, because she was really powerful in dive before they nerfed her again and again and again and again and again. She was super powerful with dive, and it's possible that she might make a kind of a comeback with that. But I think they're probably still going to use like Ana, Baptiste, or Zen, or Moira. Next question, more about tanks. So could an evasion tank work in Overwatch? I'm immediately thinking of a rogue in World of Warcraft tanking Illidan in the Burning Crusade raid, because rogues had this ability at the time, this talent, that allowed them to pretty much just avoid all damage. It was a really awesome way to actually tank an instance, and unfortunately Blizzard nerfed it into the ground so you couldn't do it anymore. But moving over to Overwatch, an evasion tank. So usually when people talk about evasion, they're talking about a random chance stuff. Like RNG, you have, you know, a 30% chance to avoid damage. I don't like that in Overwatch at all. No random stuff. Random is bad, so I don't think that would work. What you could do is you could have it so that there are a certain amount of charges. Now, this is what I did with one of my hero concepts called Mikhail, and basically he would have a passive that would allow him to dodge one attack every 10 seconds or so. I forget what it was. Actually, you know what? I'll put a link to that character on screen and down below so you can go and check it out. But the idea was that when you get attacked, you have a certain number of charges, and you would be able to avoid those attacks. So it's not based on randomness in any way, shape, form, or fashion. It's based on a cooldown, and you know how long that cooldown is going to be before you can avoid the next attack. So if they were doing something like that for a tank, then yeah, that would be pretty cool, because you would basically be absorbing the damage, kind of like a D.Va Defense Matrix or something. Like, that attack would just cease to exist, right? Like, you wouldn't take the damage, but your team wouldn't take the damage either. So that could work, but having it on any kind of like randomness or a perchance stuff, no, that would be really, really bad. But could they have an evasion one? again, yeah, it could work if it was like Mikhail, but if it was, yeah, random, no. So again, if you want to check out that hero concept, there'll be a link on screen and down below. That's going to be all the questions for this week. Thank you to everyone who submitted one. Remember, I post the question card every Saturday on the community tab of my YouTube channel. Now, that's also where I place the announcements for when I'm live streaming, and some of you guys have been posting Respawn questions under my live stream announcements. Don't do that, because that card just gets deleted when the stream is over. You have to wait till Saturday when the Respawn card gets up. Now, also, don't forget that you can get the free audiobook by using the link down below. And if you want to see all of the previous questions from the Respawn series, they're available on my Discord server. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss anything. Also, come hang out in my Discord server and my Twitch live stream. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to see what kind of cool VIP rewards you can get, check the links down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault.